And we're here at Faith Hugh Books in Ohio, going shopping. Premier Outdoors. It's like a Cabela's, and this is Mount Hope, Ohio. And this is the outside of the building. We are in Sugar Creek, Ohio, at the world's largest cuckoo clock, ready for it to do its presentation. And this is what Sugar Creek looks like. We have an Alpine Hills Museum right there, and just different shops around town here. And this is the Alpine Hills Museum, and we're going to go in here and see what's inside.
Which was the center of the Amish family life. It was functional, warm, and cheerful. Since farm work was physically demanding, huge meals were cooked and enjoyed here. The cook stove was the center of food preparation. It served for cooking, baking, and water heating, and it also warmed the kitchen. The ever-present tea kettle served as an instant supply of hot water. The oven produced mouth-watering pies, bread, and cookies that filled the kitchen with tempting aromas. Filling the coal bucket and wood box were never-ending chores for the youngsters of the family. 1890 cooks became masters at adding small amounts of coal or wood to the fire at the right moment to raise the temperatures to the proper degree to produce succulent dishes. Today's Amish kitchens still contain cook stoves, although a majority of them are now fueled by bottled gas. Kerosene, or bottled gas refrigerators, are used in most Amish homes. However, ice boxes are still being used. The use of electricity is, of course, forbidden. The pitcher pump in the corner was plumbed to a cistern or reservoir in the cellar of the house. It usually supplied rainwater that drained from the roof into the cistern. The water was used only for washing dishes, clothes, bathing, and since it was soft, for washing the hair of the fair Amish maidens. The dry sink was used for washing dishes. The bucket of drinking water was usually carried from an outside source, such as a spring house or well, and the family members all drank from the same dipper. Since austerity has always been a keynote in the Amish household, the clock shelf was one of the few places things of beauty could be displayed. Many Amish kitchens used the 30-hour key-wound Seth Thomas clock, available at that time for less than $8. Kerosene lamps provided an adequate amount of light and were carried from room to room. Amish women enjoyed pretty dishes. Many are passed from generation to generation. Amish menus are heavy with meat, potatoes, vegetables, and dairy products, most of which are grown or raised on the farm. Thank you for your attention during this quick look at our Amish neighbors. Bells like these in the fall we placed on the cows coming down from the mountain, celebrating the end of the summer season. It's summertime, the year 1890, and our immigrant Swiss cheese maker arose before first light and donned these metal-pleated shoes to prevent slipping into wet coals. He then began to kindle a fireplace blaze of hardwood to prepare a bed of coals for when the fresh milk arrived by horse-drawn milk. A can of milk, 160 pounds if full, was quickly weighed on the steel yard scale and tallied by the farmer's name on a slate blackboard. The farmer was paid for the milk by the hundredweight. The handmade kettle, imported from Switzerland in the late 1800s, held 1,600 pounds of milk and made a wheel of cheese which weighed about 125 pounds. 13 pounds of milk were needed to make a single pound of Swiss cheese. Note the kettle's flared bottom. It was designed to give a greater surface area for faster heating. After filling the kettle with the 1-hour-old fresh milk, the cheesemaker heated it to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, stirring constantly to keep it from scorching. Rennet was added to make the milk thicken. A cheese harp was used to cut the curd into pieces the size of kernels of corn. The cheesemaker then used a scoop to work the mixture and heated it to a final temperature of 120 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. The constant flow of cold spring water into the stone trough was used to cool the rennet and to wash the utensils. Because cheese making was a summertime business and the fireplace threw intense heat, the water often quenched the cheesemaker's thirst as well. The cheesecloth was used to dip the hot curds from the whey. The heavily laden cloth was dropped into a cheese hoop on the draining bed, and a wooden disc was placed on top of the curds. This homemade press formed the cheese. The newly made green cheese in the hoop was turned several times during the night, and the whey ran into a wooden bucket. The farmers took the whey home the following morning and fed it to their hogs. Our 1890 cheesemaker, by noontime, had put in a strenuous 7 hours of work. But those were the good old days, where balls like these in the fall were placed on the cows coming down from the mountain, celebrating the end of the summer season. Printing and publishing has been an important industry in Sugar Creek ever since 1890, when John C. Miller established The Budget, a weekly newspaper that has attained an international circulation, principally among the Amish and Mennonite peoples. This replica of an early print shop shows equipment used in printing the budget at varying periods of its existence. When the first budget was printed, the type was all set by hand, using a compositor's stick. Each letter was picked from a type case like that on top of the homemade wooden cabinet, each letter having a separate compartment. This was a long and tedious process, and after use, the letters had to be distributed to their proper place. Once this type was set, proofs were taken on the proof press. The proofs were read, corrections made, and then the pages were made up on an imposing stone, like the one shown here. This stone is a solid marble slab weighing 1,600 pounds. In the cabinet below the stone are racks for wooden spacing material of varying thicknesses and lengths. The narrow pieces of wood are known as reglets, and the larger blocks are called furniture. The pages were then placed in a steel frame called a chase, blocked out with wood, locked into the chase with steel wedges called coins, and the completed form was placed on the press. The early issues of the budget consisted of a single sheet printed on both sides on the 12 by 18 Chandler and Price platen press. This press was considered the workhorse of the printing industry. It could print anything from a 12 by 18-inch poster to a sheet the size of a postage stamp, on anything from tissue paper to heavy cardboard. This printing process was continued with little change until 1916, when the first linotype was purchased. From then until 1971, as many as 3 linotypes were used to set the type for the budget. This linotype was the last of the hot metal typesetting machines to be discarded. It is a Model 14 and was one of the mechanical wonders of its day when it was installed in the budget plant in 1924. It can set type in sizes from 6-point to 30-point. Large headings, etc., were set from the type in the metal cabinet. All of the reading matter was set from the linotypes. There are 3 full-size magazines for matrices and an auxiliary magazine enabling the operator to set type in 4 different sizes with a minimum of time spent making the changes. At the touch of a key, a brass matrice drops. When a line of these matrices, each bearing the mold of a letter, has been assembled, the operator sends it into the machine. By an ingenious arrangement of cams, the matrices are brought to the mold disc, and a plunger forces hot metal into the mold, thus casting a line of type. The line is then ejected from the mold, and the matrices are taken to the magazine, and each one distributed to its proper channel. All this takes place while the operator is assembling the next line of matrices. After use, the type was simply remelted and recast into new type. The average linotype operator could set about a column of reading matter in an hour. In 1971, when the budget joined the trend towards computerized typesetting and offset printing, and no longer used the linotypes, an operator could produce about 3 times that much. Today, printing and typesetting speed has been dramatically increased with the advent of the PC. All the equipment you see in this display is still in working order. Thank you for sharing part of your day here at the Alpine Hills Historical Museum.
The alcorn, from the year 1200 up until the time that telephones became prominent, the alcorn was used for communication. See, in the springtime, the cheesemaker and his helper gather up all the cows in the neighborhood, move up gradually into the mountain until by midsummer they are up so high they have no way of communicating with their friends or relatives down in the valley. So they have their own signal system, not anything like Morse code. Well, similar to Morse code, but it's a sound all its own. It's similar to that in that it plays the various types of sound, and then it, well, I'll play it a little bit and then give you an idea what it will sound like. Each family had their own signal. You know, the boy that had a girlfriend back on the farm, he had his own signal talking to her. I'll play a couple notes of it. It doesn't take, many people will say, oh, I bet that takes a lot of wind. So I immediately tell them, don't call me windy. It starts out to be a solid chunk of wood. It might even be a tree that has a shape similar to the bottom of the alcorn. So if they have a long enough alcorn, they can make it from a tree. So they clean the outside first, they shape the outside. After it looks like that one standing up there on the shelf. It's a solid chunk of wood that needs to be hollowed out. Now how would you hollow out a solid chunk of wood 14 feet long? Well, then you have the outside shaped and smoothed. You cut it all the way through the middle. So then you have 2 halves of a chunk of fir wood. So then each half is hollowed out to a thickness of about 3/16 of an inch. After you have that 2 halves glued together, then the cane, the same as you would cane the seat of an old-fashioned chair, in long strips, they wind it real tight, and that's what adds the stability. If it wasn't for that cane wrapping, it would crack, split, peel, or do something quite undesirable. The length of the alcorn is a determining factor as to the key that is possible played on it. The longer it is, the lower the pitch. The higher it is, it's more like a tenor. I'll play both of them and play them the same way, but still because of the difference in length, that is what you are going to hear, is that difference of sound. Now the longer one, that's about 10 or 12 inches longer than the next one I'll play. Now the shorter one. Because of the added length, you can hear the difference in the long one and the short one. I'm only quoting what I have heard. It can be heard under ideal conditions, a distance of 2 to 10 miles. But the conditions have to be just right, and mainly the size of the mountain across the valley, and when it starts to bounce back and forth, if there's continuation of sharp clips and mountains, that's where you get your 10 mile or 5 to 10 mile. Made of walnut with a slice to receive the handle, and then a layer of leather across the top. Now the leather softens the contact so you don't get nearly the vibration effect. So I use primarily don't notice that much there, but playing a whole sequence, there's far more ring to the sound using the wood hammer against the metal strings. Now that's just across the bridge.